Chapter 131. Two orioles sing amid the willows green, but yet not even two egg tarts. A row of white egrets fly into the blue sky, while Lu Xiaoyu and I eat seafood. Along the way, Lu Shu was going on and on with his twisted poems. If Li Xianyi, Li Aixiao, or Shi Xuejin were present, they could probably guess where Lu Xiaoyu inherited her sense of ancient literature from. Lu Shu spent his entire fortune on lighting up the fifth star. Although the painstakingly earned distress points were just gone like that, Lu Shu was delighted. The number of times he could use the corpse dog increased from 1 to 3, and the duration of his celestial cloak increased from 30 minutes to 1 hour. His strength could now rival that of an average Class D strength type. Every subsequent breakthrough would be equivalent to that rising up a class. At this point in time, no more skeletons were appearing. Lu Shu felt more at ease compared to previously. It was like walking through a field of mines, and who knew when the next skeleton was going to pop out? Before long, Lu Shu was feeling a heartache over the fruits he gave out. Why are these Daoyuan students so disappointing? They were all high and mighty in school, but after coming in here, they're all terrified. What is the point in cultivating them? He thought for a moment. What if the Heavenly Network realized from this incident that the mentality of the Daoyuan students was fundamentally different from people like Shi Fei and the soldiers? The student had never been through any hard training, and maybe the Heavenly Network would come up with a new plan to send everyone for a reformation? In fact, not anyone could go to war mentally stable with just training. Even for a highly adaptive person like Lu Shu, after his battle with Chang Hengyue, he sat quietly for a whole day thinking and came to an understanding of various morals. As he advanced towards the heart of the remains, the broad yellow-soiled ravines slowly turned into hills and valleys. Lu Shu also realized that as he got closer to the center, the world seemed to have become cold. The bald mountain ridges and canyons were only filled with rocks and soil. The scattered trees and plants were all withered away, and the tree branches were of a strange dark gray color. Lu Shu looked up at the sky, and there were also no signs of birds or any life forms. This whole situation felt as though there was something sucking away all the life force in this region. Lu Shu suddenly thought that the Heavenly Network or the soldiers that were transported here must have some food reserves. They were definitely not as underprepared as the Daoyuan students. During this trip, all the parents of Daoyuan students would be devastated due to the many casualties. At this moment, Lu Shu suddenly heard the sound of horses, which raised his alertness. The people that brought horses definitely did not enter with him, as at that point in time, there weren't any horses on Mt. Beimeng. He was very sure of this point. And yet the sound of horses could be heard ahead as he walked through the valley. There was no time or place for him to hide. A person appeared from the other end. Covered in the color black, he was clad in a heavy armor which enveloped his entire body as he sat on a horse, carrying a spear in his hand. On first look, the spear definitely wasn't normal, and it had a unique shine under the sunlight. It was definitely a few levels higher than Lu Shu's sword and axe. Upon seeing Lu Shu, that person immediately attacked. The neigh of his horse echoed through the valley as the person lifted up his spear to waist level, ready to strike. His entire armored body and the horse momentarily merged and had the aura of the perfect knight. This took Lu Shu by surprise. He knew that the incoming strike would definitely kill him, and he had no way to dodge. Compared to the skeletons that appeared from the ground, this was on a totally different level, making those things seem like the appetizer. In the split of a second, that person was right in front of Lu Shu, and he could see the white bones under the helmet. It was a skeleton. That pale white bone looked like it came from the abyss of hell. How terrifying. At this moment, horse, skeleton, spear at attention. The strike combining the strength of that person and the horse headed in Lu Shu's direction. Lu Shu stopped hesitating and immediately let go of the axe and sword, using his bare hands and brute force to bypass the sharp end of the spear and grab onto its shaft. His two arms completely stopped the spear a distance away from him, but the horse was still charging at him. And Lu Shu was being continuously pushed back and his feet left a deep trail in the soil. Lu Shu's clothes and hair were blown upwards by the blast. After the horseman and Lu Shu exchanged blows, they had already shifted about 100 meters from their original position. Lu Shu was enraged as he mustered his strength to plant his feet firmly into the ground, using his brute force to stop the horse. If those skeletons in the yellow soil were of average Class F strength, then this skeleton horseman had reached the peak of Class E. If Lu Shu hadn't light up the 5th star, it would be much tougher. At this moment, the horseman tried to pull back his spear to strike again, but he couldn't. Lu Shu was stronger. Lu Shu had a tight grip on the spear. How could I let you have this? I've even thrown away my sword and axe, and this spear seems like something good, so how can I let you have it back? Lu Shu, isn't that kind of person to let treasures go. The horseman tried several more times using his full strength, but never could release the spear from Lu Shu's grip. From the horseman's distress, +1. Lu Shu was surprised. This was the same as the situation with the squirrels and green wolves. This guy had a mind of its own. It was a stalemate and the horse was neighing continuously. The spear was unretrievable no matter what. Why did the fight turn into a robbery? Suddenly, Lu Shu once again heard the sound of horses from outside the valley. This time, a cavalry of 9 horsemen appeared. Lu Shu was in trouble. Why so many? There were 10 horsemen in front of him. Seeing that the horseman right in front of him striking once again, Lu Shu shouted, "Let go." With a burst of strength, he managed to snatch the spear away from the other party. Lu Shu had obtained the spear and no longer cared for his axe and sword as he turned around and fled. The opponents had horses and their advancement would normally be unstoppable. But Lu Shu was agile and in fact, his strength and speed far surpassed that of the cavalry. Lu Shu didn't choose an easy route but found an opportunity head up the mountain. The natural obstacles in the mountains were the cavalry's weakness. Chapter 132. Lu Shu's was jumping through the mountain. The cavalry at the foot of the mountain started retrieving their bows and arrows. They then began to aim their arrows at the mountain. Now that Lu Shu had the abilities of a Class D, why would he be afraid of all these arrows he could see? In truth, there was no way arrows could be faster than modern weapons, but no one could guarantee that there was no magical energy or instrument which could alter these weapons into becoming much more powerful. A rain of arrows pelted down at the rocks near Lu Shu. The strength of the arrows was immense as the entire arrow sunk into the mountain. It was obvious what would happen if the arrows landed on a person's body. 10 horsemen at the foot of the mountain looked around for Lu Shu's disappearing silhouette. The horseman whose spear was taken away whipped out a sword to replace his spear. Why was there such a shameless person? From the horseman's distress, +1 +1 +1 +1 +1. Lu Shu observed secretly from the mountain. These horsemen did not plan on ditching their horses to advance up the mountain. Perhaps it was because of Lu Shu's display of strength previously which scared them. Seeing these new lines of income, Lu Shu did not doubt that these soldiers could think like humans. Although he did not think these skeletons were as smart as people, the beginning of monsters being smart and having their own mind was something which made Lu Shu wary. But it was such a waste to him as well. Why did the squirrels, green wolves, or these horsemen only contribute a limited 1 distress point to him each? Was it because they're not human? Lu Shu felt that this had nothing to do with them beginning to have their own minds. If they were related, there should have been at least some which would contribute more points, right? Since everything was 1 point, something was wrong. The reality of not being able to get many points from them made Lu Shu rather disappointed. Given Lu Shu's personality, if he could get a large sum of distress points from the squirrels, he would probably have stayed there to eat some fruits every day. Who cares about the relic? Half a month of collecting distress points would give him whatever he needed. Lu Shu started to inspect that spear. Previously, he had inspected the axe and the metal sword. Apart from being exceptionally sharp and sturdy, There was nothing else which made them stand out, and his thought of them resonating with his celestial energy did not become a reality. But this spear was different. He felt something in his heart the moment he grabbed onto it. At that instant, he channeled his celestial energy into his hands before sending the energy into the spear through his hands. The entire spear lit up, and this brightness was blinding, but Lu Shu didn't care as long as it was useful. He directed the spear and sent it to the ground. The mountain rocks split apart like a slab of tofu. Good stuff. Now that corpse dog couldn't be readily revealed as it was heavily scrutinized over at the Heavenly Network. As soon as it's seen, there was bound to be people who would know that he was the Class C expert that night. So under the circumstances of not using corpse dog, having such a spear as a weapon made Lu Shu feel more at ease. But the axe and the metal sword from before weren't wasted either. His special trait was being able to get by with anything. Once he confirmed that the soldiers had left, Lu Shu went down to retrieve the axe and the metal sword and kept them on his back. Lu Shu was now walking with a swagger, with his two weapons on his back and a spear in his arms. Lu Xiaoyu discovered this special trait of Lu Shu early on. He would never dispose of used textbooks, and he would use pencils until they could not be sharpened anymore. Even clothes which could not be worn anymore were stored somewhere. What if they could be of use someday? Since young, everyone would dispose of their old stuff, especially stuff like pencils, but Lu Shu had never wasted anything. On a small mountain, a group of people was sneaking glances downwards. Everyone was very familiar with being stealthy, and they made not a single sound when they were moving. Their path led them to this place, where the mountain peak was extremely high ahead, higher than the clouds. No one knew how high the peak would be if they continued walking. The peak of this mountain was smooth and steep, making it impossible to climb. Instead of calling it a mountain, an impenetrable wall sealing away the core of the remains was a better depiction. Anyone who wanted to advance had to start from the canyons down below. As for the canyons, there were skeleton soldiers patrolling the area. "What about our Heavenly King?" someone asked curiously. "Did you guys see him before we grouped up?" Yes, someone was behind a rock observing all the movements below the mountain. He continued, slightly troubled, "Saw him on the first day." "Then where is he?" The questioner was curious. 3 Class C Indians invaded the remains. The Heavenly King went to chase after them. TSK, someone took in a cold breath. Chasing someone instead of exploring the remains? The group of people hiding on the mountain was made up of a complex group of people. There were people from the Heavenly Network, soldiers, and even Daoyuan students. When the remains opened, the center was where the most people gathered. At that time, 6 Class D Heavenly Network experts led a group of other humans. Although there were casualties, most of them managed to take cover up in the mountains. As for people who were further away, they did not have the ability to help them as well. At this time, Class C was considered as valuable as a Heavenly King. There's a scarce situation concerning the number of valuable practitioners. The older generation had trained for a long time using alternative means to achieve Class B, and with the new surge of magical energy, the new practitioners had not been able to reach Class C yet. As a result, Class DS were already considered decent combat power. The peak of this mountain now had about 50 people. But their strength in this remain against skeletons and other weird monsters was poor. After all, soldiers and Daoyuan students weren't able to fight effectively. The soldiers displayed a much greater grit and mentality compared to Daoyuan students. Seemingly, they did not fear death when called upon. And the soldiers were actually the most prepared. Each one of them had with them dry rations, canned food, rice. In reality, they had everything they needed, and they were not selfish. They did not have any notion of hiding any of their rations, and they shared whatever they had with them. They could share what they rationed for a day with everyone else, and they could still go on for a period of time this way. To be honest, the Heavenly Network was rather lucky to have soldiers here with them this time, or they would not have been able to find any food. The opening of this remain was very different from the past. This remain was exceptionally huge and the time spent in here was exceptionally long. The previous incident at Shibei was settled in just 2 days. And the leaders of the Heavenly Network this time were not very reliable. Actually, everyone understood that it was better to eradicate any intruders before focusing on searching for the relic, or else they might be ambushed. Even so, the Heavenly King should come back after eradicating the intruders. Heavenly King, are you lost? Chapter 133. In fact, Li Yixiao had his own reasons. Before the magical era, the India side had little Class BS and many Class CS. Now that so many appeared, it was a difficult situation. Although there was a huge gap in strength between a Class B and C, a large army of ants could kill even an elephant. The Heavenly Network thought that it was an easy task for Li Yixiao as Class CS could never hurt him. As long as he got the hang of it, the Class C Indians would, one by one, die at his hands. The opponents were careful, but Li Yixiao was afraid that these Indians would lay their hands on the rest of Heavenly Network. And so he slowly lured them out of the battle zone and slowly dealt with them. Li Yixiao's kung fu was foreign and forceful while the kung fu of the Indians was more gentle. Both parties fought for quite a few days, but as of now, Li Yixiao had killed a few of their Class C practitioners. There was still no significant change in the situation. In fact, there were even experts from other countries joining in the fight. They unanimously agreed to get rid of Li Yixiao first. He was very clear that the other Heavenly Kings were keeping watch at the borders of the country to prevent foreign Class BS from entering, and so he had to deal with this himself. In reality, the best use of Class BS in remains wasn't to look for the relic, but to stop other experts. It wasn't realistic for the Heavenly Network to prevent all the practitioners from coming in. After all, practitioners were like superhumans, their movements were swift and considered to be ghost-like. After fighting for a few days, Li Yixiao was feeling temperamental and the number of Class CS who died at his hands had already exceeded 10. In a temporary base in the mountains. During the battle these few days, an awkward situation arose with regards to the combat power of soldiers. Normal automatic rifles were of little effectiveness against the skeletons. Firstly, a bullet's killing power was due to its spiraling momentum that causes significant damage to internal organs, after piercing through the human body. But now that the enemy was a group of skeletons, the bullet's only power was its force, but the skeletons had a small frame. But the biggest issue was that the armor the enemy wore was unusual, and normal modern weapons couldn't pierce through it. And so the soldiers were helpless. Their basic physical capabilities were far inferior to that of practitioners, and when escaping or chasing, they were at a huge disadvantage. Be it the Heavenly Network or the soldiers, they all had a form of combat discipline. But as for the Daoyuan students, everyone initially had high hopes for them, but in the end, besides a few exceptions, they were too disappointing. After the numerous battles with the skeletons, they learned something about them. The types of skeleton soldiers were mainly just the armored cavalry and the foot soldiers. The skeleton soldiers moved in groups and their main objective was to watch over the outer regions and to kill any living thing. The cavalry were fast while the foot soldiers were troublesome. These skeletons seemed to have a lot of experience in battle. Although the foot soldiers weren't agile, each and everyone had outstanding killing techniques. They also had a chemistry between them which led to great teamwork. But the Heavenly Network also found a weakness of these group-based soldiers. It was that their individual minds were not as developed and each group would have a center brain kind of existence. The Heavenly Network called these existences the leader. They found out through battle that as long as they could identify this leader first and take him out, the chemistry between the rest of the soldiers would be greatly reduced. Without chemistry, based on just their individual combat power, they were about the strength of a Class E and not as terrifying anymore. It was through this method that they were able to defeat a group of scout cavalry and even killed 2 horsemen. And now, snipers were very useful as they could take out the leader. A Class D leader from the Heavenly Network lied prone on the ground and looked down the edge of a mountain. There was a group of scout cavalry passing by, and this was a critical route leading to the core of the remains. If they couldn't beat these skeletons, everyone would have a hard time. And even if they managed to sneak in, what if it was a trap and the skeletons were to attack them from outside? Wouldn't they be surrounded? So their plan was to slowly get rid of these small groups. No idea when we would be able to go in, and the rations are depleting fast. A black coat said. Perhaps there's food at the center of the remains. I heard from old Zhang that in his trip to the Shibei, there were food, medication, fruits, and many other things at the center of the remains. Are you for real? Really? But it's hard to say this time. In this remains, it seems like the closer we got to the center, the lesser the signs of life. The leader of this skeleton group is quite obvious, someone exclaimed. Hearing that, everyone crawled over to see what was going on. Normally, they had to observe carefully before they could identify the leader, but this group was as the other guy said. It was obvious. Only one of the horsemen was different from the rest. Everyone else was carrying a spear while this one was carrying a sword. Only this skeleton was unique, and who could it be beside the leader? This was such a giveaway. At this point in time, all the members lying prone unanimously agreed this is the leader. Kill it and the rest will be easy to deal with. Sniper moved to a higher ground. And 2 Heavenly Network members cover him. Someone ordered. The sniper had to move to a higher ground so that their actual location would not accidentally be revealed. After the sniper had taken out the skeleton leader, everyone would deal with the rest of the scouts. The 2 Heavenly Network members' protection was in case of the sniper's slow retreat. After all, the sniper was just a normal human being. The Heavenly Network practitioners were different. Once they had achieved Class E and completed the Mysterious Senses chapter, carrying a normal person back to the rendezvous point was an easy task. The sniper and 2 bodyguards left while the rest hid to observe. No one dared to make a bold move. Someone was suddenly curious. I feel like this is too easy, something is not right. What can go wrong? Think about it, although we had only encountered foot soldiers previously, their leaders always had the same appearance as the rest. But this, it doesn't even have a spear. That's right. Could it be that it lost the spear? A Class D practitioner thought. So funny. How could a skeleton lose its own weapon? Chapter 134. The Class D leader said calmly before the sniper left, you only have 1 shot at this. If you miss or misfire, we could possibly be forced to move our base. 20 minutes had passed. Sniper, take your position, someone said calmly. Everyone looked down at that group of horsemen. Once they killed these troops, they could continue to advance their search. As they had already beaten a few skeleton scouts previously, they managed to obtain some weapons, armors, and equipment. 2 spears and 2 broadswords. The armor looked normal, but it was extremely weird when worn. It actually weighed more than 100 pounds, no wonder it could ward off normal gunshots. And as for the spears and broadswords, not only were they exceptionally sturdy and sharp, they could resonate with a person's magical energy. Some people were thinking that these weapons would be hard to obtain once they were handed over to the larger group, considering that they would probably hand them over to the experts who were about to reach Class C. Even so, these items were very valuable. Thinking of which, the entire country only had 2 remains. How many of these valuable items could there be? There were definitely not enough for hundreds of thousands of practitioners over the country. The higher skilled practitioners would obviously get the priority. But the normal men would not suffer as well. After all, the Heavenly Network had always claimed that the more work credit, the closer one would be to honing his next skill and obtaining magical stones. In reality, many Daoyuan students thought skills and arts would be taught without restraint. They thought it was a given that the Heavenly Network would impart everything to them. Only later did they realize that after the Mysterious Senses chapter, apart from the tier of prodigies, everyone had to make some contributions. What sort of contributions? This was something practical the Heavenly Network wanted to let everyone understand. To train peacefully to gain more skills without contributions is something impossible. For example, if a Tier B student felt like he could carry on training diligently without magical stones, and that he could choose to not complete tasks given to him by superiors, he was wrong. He would ultimately realize that there would be no techniques taught to him to allow him to continue learning. So everyone within the Heavenly Network was actually quite motivated. These horsemen down below might be hard to deal with, but as long as a sniper could take out their leader, the ensuing battle would cause some injuries at the most. Luckily there were snipers, or else there would definitely be sacrifices if everyone clashed head-on. The sounds of horses galloping echoed up from above. The Class D team leader took a deep breath and raised his hand nervously. The sniper understood the signal to proceed and aimed at his target through his scope. He adjusted his scope towards the soldiers and started to control his breathing. He only had one shot. The bullet had to be shot from his rifle and accurately pierce through the other party's skull for his mission to be a success. Bang! The shot was fired. Everyone saw the team leader's skull split into smithereens. Everyone wanted to cheer. It was a success. But just as they were about to charge out to rout the remaining small teams of skeletons, the Class D team leader rumbled in a low voice, "Something's wrong." Everyone looked down to see the group of skeletons regrouping in an orderly and structured defensive formation even after the death of the leading skeleton. Shouldn't they be in a state of chaos? What's going on? Someone asked softly, "Was it a wrong shot?" "That's not the leader?" The Class D leader nodded painfully. It was a wrong shot. But why was he different from the other skeletons? It could be that he lost his spear. Lost his spear. Everyone was flustered beyond comprehension. What sort of soldier was this? How could he just lose his spear? It was impossible to dash down now that the other party had been alerted. It was too much a task to take them head-on, and there would be a huge number of casualties. Besides, they had to be wary of a counterattack by these skeletons. Previous battles had proven that these skeletons were relentless and would keep on attacking. Retreat. We have to change our base. Take the path on the mountain. The Class D leader was in a slight headache. Why did he not observe more? Could it all be a plan of the skeletons to have one of their minions to behave differently from the rest? It was too scheming. The humans had underestimated their intelligence. With his spear in his hand, Lu Shu treaded carefully across mountains. Since that previous encounter with the skeleton cavalry, he swore not to take flat and simple paths. He thought back and realized that he could have lost his life if there were 10 skeleton soldiers charging at him back then. But he wasn't extremely terrified, and he even considered attacking the skeletons. Lu Shu was as such. Seeing that the spear was of good quality, he wanted more. Lu Shu thought for a moment. He could not hide all his loot from other people once the remain closes. If only he could keep his things in that system of his, but he couldn't. So whatever items he got with him then would be seen by everyone. And after observing for a long time, the patrol route of these skeletons blocked out the route to this canyon. As long as they were still here, Lu Shu will have to be wary of them. He would not be able to fight 10 of them at once, and the detour was too far. In such a big place, it was very easy to get lost. From his previous experiences, Lu Shu felt that he could steal one or two once in a while. Naturally, Lu Shu had already matured into a man unlike the one at the temple fair who knew nothing of this changing world. At that time, he was just thinking of what to do the next day, how he could afford his fees and how he could get more food for Lu Xiaoyu. Although he wasn't very rich now, everything was different. To the current Lu Shu, he would run away from whatever he could not fight. After all, these skeletons could not catch up with him. As long as he didn't stay at places where the cavalry could charge at him, the other party could do nothing to him. This was the advantage that strength-type metahumans held during battle. Compared to the others in this place, Lu Shu was freer and left to his own devices. This was a place where power was all that mattered, as the weak would end up as corpses. Lu Shu waited under the shade between rocks to observe the soldiers. He had been here for 3 hours, but he was extremely patient. He had always been patient. He had to wait for the best chance. Chapter 135. Time went from dusk to dawn, then from dawn to noon. The sunlight in the remains was bright and warm. But as it cascaded through this lifeless heart of the remain, everything seemed to turn cold, and the occasional wind seemed like an ice-cold snake slithering smoothly on the surface. Lu Shu made use of the night and hid in a path in the mountains, his eyes constantly fixated on the narrow path below him. He was waiting for his chance. This sort of occurrence was not at all uninteresting to a person like Lu Shu, it seemed more like a game to him. Just like when he was younger, he would play hide-and-seek in the orphanage. When the seeker closed his eyes to count to 100, Lu Shu and his friends would go and hide. Most kids would be found very quickly as the orphanage was not very big. Finding Lu Shu was always the toughest. He would hide on the roof of the old house and go one day without eating or drinking. To avoid going to the toilet, he would even bring a plastic bottle with him. When it came to the spirit of playing such games, no one could beat him. From then on, no one played hide-and-seek with him, as it was like a thriller. A game would cause a person to disappear, would you believe that? Finally, the teacher barred anyone from playing hide-and-seek with Lu Shu. Back then, Lu Shu found hide-and-seek to be very meaningful and had no idea why he was prevented from playing it. So now, he found some joy in hiding in his position, something which not many people would enjoy. Lu Shu continued to wait patiently, till the gallops of horses could be heard. Lu Shu suddenly tensed up. It's coming. On a mountain not far away, the group that relocated their base finally settled down. Their Class D leader was using his telescope, looking for traces of the skeleton squad below them. They moved through the night yesterday, and indeed, not long after they started moving, the skeleton squad started searching the mountain. Their chemistry was amazing, and the Heavenly Network had to follow their original plan to retreat. Under these circumstances, where it wasn't a war for land, everyone felt that it wasn't worth it to lose their lives here. This was the Heavenly Network's view as well. They wanted as little casualties as possible within the remains, as these people could be of much better use out there in the real world. Indeed, there wouldn't be any reward for not obtaining anything within the remain, but on the other hand, there definitely wouldn't be any punishment. Everyone agreed with Nie Ting's stance on this matter. If the superiors felt that their subordinates could die in the hunt for resources within the remain, the morale of everyone would be extremely low. What should we do next? Now they are extremely cautious, and their formation is much tighter than before. The sniper no longer has a good position with a good view anymore. It's like they know how to defend themselves against potential dangers, someone analyzed. The Class D leader frowned, observe and find out which one is the real leader. If all else fails, we'll clash head-on with them. It's not impossible for you guys to coordinate with me to kill their leader. This was the last resort. Hey, you guys look. There's someone hidden up there within the gaps of the mountain. Someone exclaimed. This was quite weird and surprising. Why was there a person hidden over there? Everyone looked over. Just 3 meters above the passing skeletons was a huge gap, and indeed, there was a person hidden there silently watching his surroundings. The person's shirt was old and rugged, while his facial features could not be made out clearly. His lower body was out in the light, while the most of his upper body was hidden in the shadows, just like a dangerous assassin. Who is this? Any of you know him? Is he a Daoyuan student? Someone asked suddenly. Most of the members of the Heavenly Network who were present were form teachers, so the question was asked to see if any of them knew him. After all, based on his attire, the other party should be merely a Daoyuan student. But what was a Daoyuan student doing over there alone? Was he hiding there for his own safety or? In their impression, the current Daoyuan students were rather useless in battle. The group of students behind them were constantly complaining of lethargy and hunger. and had absolutely no intention of joining the next battle. To be candid, everyone did not have a good impression of the Daoyuan students. According to them, Daoyuan students should all be trained somewhere before they could be considered useful. As for the opinions of the Daoyuan students, although they felt that it was rather illogical for the other party to be hiding there purely for safety, they could not draw any other possibility from the sight. Just then, that student started moving. Just when the skeleton squad passed by that gap, the student jumped down at the last horseman without any hesitation. What the F*********. What does he want? Is he mad? It can't be. Do you guys know this student? Is he mad? No one could identify that it was Lu Shu. It was not because there was no form teacher from Luocheng here, but even if there was, it would be hard to identify him from his dirty and scruffy appearance. At this moment, everyone was stunned and went to the edge of their mountain to see what was going on. Immediately after, they witnessed something which sent them into further shock. That Daoyuan student actually landed accurately at that last horseman and had his hand on his spear. Just when they thought this student was about to be killed by the 9 horsemen, the student actually dragged the spear and knocked the skeleton off his horse. Damn, that's too fierce, some of their jaws almost dropped. No one expected this student to have such strength. He actually knocked the soldier off his horse, amazing. He's in danger. The Class D practitioner knitted his eyebrows. That student changed his impression of Daoyuan students greatly, but he felt that he was rather impulsive and unwise. After all, there were 9 other horsemen, he could knock one down, but it's far from dead. Yeah. So what if you're strong enough to knock him down? What's next? Probably death. Let's go save him, someone suggested. Just then, changes occurred at the battle again. Just when they thought this student would be surrounded, he actually snatched the spear and ran from the skeletons. He didn't run by the road and amazingly, he climbed up the mountains instead. The rest of the skeletons sent arrows flying towards him, but not a single one hit the target. It was simply breathtaking skill. Everyone held their breath and looked at the amazing scene of escape they were witnessing. A person actually escaped perfectly from the 9 horsemen. This sort of feeling was surreal. Could this really be a Daoyuan student? As Lu Shu disappeared into the peak of the mountain, someone exclaimed, "Look! He already has 2 spears." Then, he started looking at the skeleton squad below once more. His gaze stayed on that skeleton as he whipped out his broadsword to replace his original weapon. Everyone stayed silent. They finally understood why that skeleton had in his hand a broadsword, instead of a spear. Damn.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to